New Mexico Territory, July 1874. The heat pressed down like a punishment in the high desert outside of Silver Basin, and by the time the sun dropped low against the cliffs, the wind carried the smell of gunpowder and dust. That was when Orin Allister found her alone, bloodied and barefoot, dragging herself through mesquite brush with a split lip and no name on her tongue. He was on his way back from delivering cattle to Fort Craig when he spotted her near the river bend, where the land cracked like old leather. She looked like she'd crawled out of hell, and for a second Orin thought she might be a ghost. But then she turned her face toward him. Her eyes were open, alive. Orin dropped to one knee beside her. "Can you hear me?" She flinched, tried to shove herself away, but her strength gave out fast. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said. "Name's Orin Allister. I'm a cowboy, not a killer." It took her a while to speak. When she did, her voice rasped like gravel. Faye Kessler." He lifted her gently, careful with every move. She was light, too light, and her dress was torn in 5 places. Her arms were covered in bruises. He said nothing more. There was no need yet. He just got her onto his horse and rode hard for the ranch house he kept at the edge of the basin. The next morning, she woke in a clean bed with wildflowers on the table and a basin of cool water nearby. Her eyes darted around the room, panic rising. "You're safe," Orin said from the doorway. "I found you out near the river. You were hurt bad." Faye sat up slow, clutching the blanket to her chest. "How long was I out?" 2 days. "Fever broke last night." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "I had to run. I didn't have a choice." "You do not owe me the story," Orin said, walking in and setting a tin cup on the table beside her. "But you do need to drink that." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "They said I was too damaged to love," she whispered. "Said I was nothing but trouble, left me with bruises and worse." Orin turned slowly. "Not to me, you are not." She stared at him like she did not believe it, like no one had ever said something like that to her before. Over the next few days, Faye stayed mostly quiet. She helped around the house where she could, washing dishes, folding linens, but she never left the porch at night. Sometimes Orin would see her sitting there, knees pulled up, eyes fixed on the horizon like she was waiting for someone to come finish what had been started. He never asked about the scars. He only kept showing up: coffee in the morning, stew in the evening, quiet company when the silence got too heavy. One afternoon, she asked, "Why are you being kind to me?" He looked up from where he was oiling his saddle. "Because you are still here." That counts for something. Tears filled her eyes, but she bit them back. "I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. They are gone." Orin's hands stilled. "Gone where?" "They were taken by the man I ran from. Said if I ever tried to leave, he would make sure I never saw them again." Her voice cracked. "I should have never left. I should have stayed until I knew how to get them out." "You did what you had to do to survive," Orin said. "That ain't weakness." She curled in on herself, shoulders trembling. "I cannot live without them." Orin stood up and walked over to her. He crouched beside the chair. "Then we will get them back." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I said we will get them back, both of them." "What are their names?" "Ruth and Ramai," she said, breath catching. Orin nodded. "Then that is what we do next." Faye stared at him like she might break apart from the inside. "Why would you help me?" He gave her the truth. "Because I have not seen someone fight that hard to live in a long time, and because you matter." That night she cried for the first time. Not loud, not wild, but silent tears that slid down her face in the dark. Orin sat beside her on the porch without a word, just close enough for her to feel he was there. The next morning, Faye had her boots on before the sun rose. They rode into Silver Basin, where the sheriff remembered Faye's old life just enough to lower his eyes when she walked in. "You sure you want to stir this up again?" he asked. "I want my children," she said. Orin stood behind her, arms crossed. We need names, locations, and a deputy willing to ride with us if needed." Sheriff gave a long sigh. "The man who took them, he took off east toward Lincoln County, runs with a couple of hired guns, mean ones." "Then we will ride east," Orin said. They left that night, traveling light but fast. Faye kept her eyes ahead, her jaw tight. Orin rode beside her, saying little but watching every shadow. On the third day they found the camp. It was dusk. Smoke curled from a fire and two small figures sat near a wagon, watched over by a man with a rifle across his knees. Faye's breath caught. "That's them. That's Ruth and Ramai." Orin nodded. "You stay here." "No," he looked over, surprised. "I am not hiding anymore," she said. It was quick. Orin took the lead, flanked left, and Faye moved in from the right. The man guarding the children had barely time to shout before Orin knocked the rifle from his hands and dropped him with a hard punch. Faye ran to her children, dropping to her knees as she wrapped them both up. They clung to her, crying, all three of them tangled together in the dirt. The man she had escaped from came charging out of the wagon. He froze when he saw Orin standing between him and Faye. "You do not want to try it," Orin said, voice low. The man spat in the dust. "She is mine." "No, she never was." Orin drew fast and the man backed down just as fast. The sheriff's deputy rode in moments later, trailing dust and shouting for order. They took the man in cuffs and Orin never looked back. That night, the four of them camped under the stars. Ruth curled up beside her mother, and Ramai snored softly on her other side. Faye sat beside the fire watching the flames. Orin handed her a blanket. "You did it." She looked up at him. "We did it." He sat beside her, close now. "You are not damaged, Faye," she turned, eyes shining. "You really believe that?" "I do, and I want to stay beside you. As long as you will let me." She leaned into him, letting her head rest on his shoulder. "Then do not go anywhere." "I was not planning to." The wind that crossed the Jornada Plain in early August carried no mercy, but Orin's ranch held steady against its low-slung adobe walls, a garden of beans and squash clawing through dry earth, and a buckskin horse named Mercy tied at the post. Faye stood beneath the cottonwood near the well, combing Ruth's hair while Ramai tugged at the hem of Orin's shirt, asking about horseshoes. "You can't nail them on just anywhere," Orin said, crouching beside the boy. "It takes a steady hand and a horse that trusts you won't hurt her." "Do they kick?" Ramai's eyes were wide. "If you're careless." Faye watched from under her lashes, her fingers patient in Ruth's tangled curls. The girl leaned into her mother's knee, quiet and still, and Faye rested her hand on Ruth's back without thinking. When Orin looked over, she didn't turn away. Later that evening, while the children napped in the shade, Orin worked the fence line. Faye joined him with a hammer and a satchel of nails over one shoulder. "You don't have to," he started. "I want to," she said, lifting a post upright. "You think I can't? I think you've already done more than most would." She pressed her boot into the base of the post and drove the first nail clean. "Then let me do this too." They worked in rhythm until the sun tilted low. When they paused for water, she leaned against the fence and looked out over the basin. "I used to dream of this," she said. "Open sky, no one watching me, a place where I could decide what came next." Orin unscrewed the canteen and handed it to her. "What would come next?" She drank, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "I'd stay if I was wanted. You are." She didn't answer right away, just turned to watch a hawk circle above the cottonwoods. "I still wake up not knowing where I am. Still can't sleep when the wind sounds like boots on gravel. That'll ease." "Has it eased for you?" Orin's jaw tightened. "Some ghosts take longer to leave." Faye studied him. "What was her name?" He looked down at his hands. "Lena, my sister." We were caught in the drylands when I was 17. She didn't make it out." Faye said nothing, but her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. That night, Orin sat on the porch sharpening his knife while Faye mended Ramai's only pair of trousers by lantern light. The children were inside, curled together like pups in a nest of quilts. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "I did, before. And now," he set the knife down, "now I think about you." She didn't speak for a long while. Then, setting down her sewing, she leaned forward and said, "They used to tell me I was too damaged to love. They were wrong." She looked at him, searching. "Why do you keep saying that like you know me?" "Because I've watched you learn my land in 2 days, soothe a child's fear with one word, and patch a fence with better aim than most ranch hands I've hired." He tipped his hat back. "That's not damage, that's strength." Faye's breath hitched. "And if I fall apart again, then I'll be there. Not to fix you, just to stand beside you." She nodded once, and that was the end of it for now. But when they turned in for the night, she didn't hesitate before brushing her hand against his arm, a quiet promise made without words. In the weeks that followed, the house filled in around them. Ruth chased chickens through the garden rows, Ramai rode Mercy bareback while Orin held the reins, and Faye stitched curtains from flour sacks. She didn't ask permission. Orin didn't expect her to. One morning, Faye stepped into the barn and found Orin oiling the leather straps of a new saddle. "You building that for someone else?" she asked. "For you," she blinked. "I don't ride much." "You will. You've earned the right to go where you please." She stepped closer, fingers grazing the saddle horn. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." She didn't. She just laid her hand atop his, and he turned his palm so their fingers folded together. When autumn came, the cottonwoods turned gold and the nights cooled enough for quilts. Faye taught Ruth to bake biscuits without burning them, and Ramai asked Orin if he could become a cowboy when he got old enough. "You can become whatever you want," Orin told him. "Even a sheriff. Even that, though I'd start with learning to tie your boots first." Faye laughed from the doorway, and Orin turned to catch the sound before it slipped away. That night, after the children were asleep, Faye stepped barefoot into the kitchen where Orin stood filling the stove with kindling. "I don't have much to offer," she said. "No dowry, no name worth passing down." He stood and faced her. "You've got your heart, your grit. That's more than enough." She hesitated, then reached for him, her hand at his chest. "I've never trusted anyone like this before." "Then let me be the one who earns it." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, steady as the land beneath them. Outside, the wind had quieted. Inside, the fire caught, and nothing felt broken anymore. The first frost came early that year, tracing silver over the window panes and curling the last of the squash vines under its breath. Orin stood at the barn rail, watching Mercy nose through a patch of brittle grass, his coat buttoned high and collar turned against the wind. From inside the house came the low hum of Faye's voice as she read to Ruth, each word slow and careful, as if shaping something solid from the air. He didn't go in right away. He liked knowing they were there, that the fire would be lit, and that supper would be warm. He liked the quiet of it, the steadiness. When he stepped through the door, Ramai was leaning over a sheet of paper, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. Faye looked up from the rocking chair, one hand resting on the book in her lap, the other smoothing Ruth's braid where the girl slept against her side. "You made it back quick," she said, setting the book aside. "Supplies were light in town," Orin replied, setting down a sack of flour. "Dry beans, lamp oil, a bit of salt pork." Faye rose, lifting Ruth without waking her. "I'll put her down." "I can," Orin offered. She paused, holding the girl close. "No, let me." He nodded and stepped aside. When she returned, they shared a quiet meal, nothing grand. Just cornbread, beans, and slices of pear she'd preserved weeks earlier. Afterward, while Ramai gathered up his drawings and climbed into bed, Orin pulled a chair beside the hearth and leaned back, his legs stretched out, arms loose at his sides. "I've been thinking," Faye said, folding a dishcloth in her lap. "There's a schoolhouse being built near the old Mission Road. They're looking for someone to help teach come spring. You want to take it?" he asked without surprise. "I want to try," she said. "I never finished my own schooling, but I remember enough. I could make something of it." He looked at her hands still and strong against the worn fabric. "Then you should. I'll manage things here. Ruth and Ramai can help me with the chores." Faye studied him, unsure. "It won't be easy. Nothing worth keeping ever is." She didn't answer, just leaned back in her chair and tucked her legs beneath her. The firelight caught the edge of her profile sharp, sure, and no longer shadowed by fear. The next morning, Orin saddled Mercy and rode out early to mend broken fence near the southern ridge. By the time he returned, the sun had dipped, and the scent of coffee and cloves drifted from the kitchen. Faye stood at the stove, her sleeves rolled up, her hair braided back. "Ramai's carving again," she said as he entered. "He's got a piece of hickory he's turning into a bird." "Good wood for it," Orin said, hanging up his coat. "He's got steady hands." "Like his mother," she said without looking up. They didn't speak again until the children had gone to bed. Faye stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the moon rise over the basin. "I used to wonder if I'd ever want anything again," she said. "After all of it. If I'd ever feel clean or still." Orin stepped beside her, his voice low. "You're not what was done to you." She turned toward him. "Then what am I?" He reached up and slid a finger beneath the edge of her braid, letting it fall loose. "You're the woman who brought a house back to life with her hands, who stood her ground when every part of her shook, who gave her children something better than fear." She didn't cry. She just leaned in, resting her head against his chest. "I don't know how to be loved," she whispered. "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to let it happen." That night they didn't close the door between their rooms. Days shortened. The wind came colder. Faye rose early now, lighting the stove in the dark, preparing lessons on a slate board she'd sanded herself. Orin built a cradle from pine and left it beside the fire, saying nothing when she ran her fingers along the smooth edges. By December, the house had changed. Not just in the way it smelled or the way the floor creaked warmer underfoot, but in the shape of the air itself. There was laughter now, not loud or constant, but honest. And there were long silences that didn't feel empty, only full of meaning. One evening, as snow began to fall in slow, deliberate flakes, Faye took Orin's hand and led him outside. The children were inside by the fire, reading. They stood together beneath the cottonwood, its branches bare, the sky pale with moonlight. "I never thought I'd ask for anything again," she said. "But I want this. I want you. Not because I need saving, but because I see you, Orin. And I trust you to see me." He stepped closer, his voice rough with something he didn't name. "Will you stay here with me? For good?" She nodded, the snow catching in her hair. "Yes." He kissed her, then not rushed or wild, but slow, like a promise, like something built to last. Inside, the fire crackled and the children slept soundly. And outside, under the hush of falling snow, they stood wrapped in each other, no shadows left between them. In January, the wind turned sharp as a blade. It came down off the Manzano Mountains with a howl that rattled the eaves and scattered the hens from their coop. Snow had crusted hard over the basin, and Orin had to chop through it each morning just to reach the troughs. Inside, Faye sat near the hearth, her fingers red from scrubbing clothes in cold water, a thin steam rising from the iron kettle on the hook. Ruth and Ramai practiced letters on a slate she'd borrowed from the schoolhouse, their heads bent close together. Orin stepped in, stomping snow from his boots. "Roof's holding, but I'll need to check it again after the thaw." Faye looked up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I noticed the kitchen chimney's drawing slow. Might want to clear the flue before it backs up." He crouched near the fire, warming his palms. "I'll do it after supper. You've got a sharp eye." She smiled, faint and tired. "I didn't used to. I do now." That night, after the children were asleep and the flue cleared without fuss, she joined him on the porch wrapped in a wool shawl, her breath clouding in the air. "I received a letter," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "From who?" "A woman I knew back in the Arizona Territory, Clara Tilden. She worked at the mission school there. Said she heard I was alive through her cousin in Silver Basin. You trust her?" "I did once. She offered to send books for the schoolhouse here. Said she'd pray for me." Orin leaned against the post. "You want her prayers?" Faye exhaled. "I want her to know I didn't disappear, that I made it out and didn't vanish like they all expected. She'll know that soon enough." They stood a while longer, the silence between them easy. A low owl called from the cottonwood, and Faye turned toward the sound. "You ever miss being alone?" she asked. Orin looked at her. "Not once since you came." She didn't reply, just reached for his hand and held it until the cold soaked through wool and skin. By late February, the thaw began. The basin turned to mud, and the corral fence sagged under its weight. Orin and Ramai worked through the worst of it, hauling stone to shore up the low spots, while Ruth gathered kindling with her mother behind the barn. One morning, Faye paused halfway to the well, palm pressed to her lower back. "You all right?" Orin asked, setting down a sack of feed. She nodded, breathing slow. "Just stiff. Been on my feet since before sunup." He watched her a moment, then came to her side. "I'll finish the pump. Go rest your legs. I'm not made of glass." "No, you're not. But you don't have to wear yourself to the bone either." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. "You always know what to say to make me sit down." "That's because I want you standing with me for a long time." She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. In March, the schoolhouse opened its doors. Faye walked the children down the road at first light, her coat too thin but her chin high. She returned quiet that first day, her hands stained with chalk and ink. "They listened," she said, removing her boots at the door. "Every one of them. Even the older boys." Orin looked up from carving a new yoke. "Didn't expect they wouldn't." "I did." He stood, wiping his hands. "Well, stop that." She laughed once, soft and surprised at herself. That spring, the garden came back. Faye planted rows with the care of someone building a future, not just food. Orin built her a bench beneath the cottonwood, and she rayed there in the evenings while the children chased frogs near the stream bed. One late afternoon, she came into the barn while Orin was brushing down Mercy. She moved slow, steady, and when he turned, she was already beside him. "I've been thinking," she said, voice calm. "Dangerous thing to do," he answered, brushing her hand with his thumb. "About marrying you." He set the brush down. "You sure you want that with me?" "I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't." He stepped closer, close enough to see the gold in her eyes. "Then let's make it right." They didn't send for a preacher. They asked the schoolmaster to say a few words under the cottonwood, with Ruth holding a handful of wildflowers and Ramai clutching Orin's old hat like it was a treasure. Afterwards, she leaned against Orin's shoulder while the wind moved through the grass, and he whispered, "You're not too damaged to love." She turned her face to his. "Not to you, I'm not." He kissed her once, slow and certain. And when the sun dipped low behind the mountains, they walked back toward the house together, one step at a time, with nothing left behind them but shadow and dust. By early May, the basin had turned green at the edges, the kind of green that came slowly after a hard winter, reluctant but certain. The cottonwood outside the house had leafed out, trembling with every breeze, and Orin found himself pausing beneath it more often, watching the land shift into color again. Faye spent her mornings at the schoolhouse, walking the narrow road with Ruth and Ramai beside her, a cloth-bound book tucked beneath her arm. She returned by midday, dust on her hem and ink smudged across the side of her hand, always humming something low and tuneless as she stepped through the gate. That afternoon, she came home quiet. Orin was in the garden, checking for signs of beetles in the beans. He looked up when she approached, shading his eyes against the sun. "Everything all right? I spoke with the land committee after lessons," she said. "They're offering parcels near the river bend for teachers, ones who plan to stay." He stood, brushing soil from his hands. "You thinking of taking it?" "I don't want to live anywhere but here," she said. "But if we claimed it together, we could use the water for growing, maybe even plant a small orchard." Orin nodded, considering. "Wouldn't be more than a few acres, enough for roots." He stepped closer, tilting his head. "You sure?" "I am." He held her gaze a moment longer, then reached out and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. "Then let's put our name to it." They filed the claim 2 days later. Orin signed with his usual steady hand. Faye's signature came slower, more careful, as if each letter mattered. When it was done, she folded the paper herself and slipped it into her satchel. Neither of them said anything as they left the office, but they walked back side by side, their pace in rhythm. That summer, they worked the new plot together. Orin tilled the ground with a borrowed plow while Faye planted saplings she'd brought from the Mission Nursery, apple and apricot, 2 each. Ruth and Ramai carried buckets from the stream, grumbling but grinning. When the first leaves unfurled, Orin built a low fence from cedar to keep out deer. One evening, as the sun threw long shadows across the rows, Faye knelt beside a young apple tree, brushing soil from her palms. "Never thought I'd plant something that might outlive me," she said. Orin set down the hoe and crouched beside her. "That's the best kind of thing to plant." She looked over, eyes soft. "You think we'll stay here forever?" "I don't see any reason we wouldn't. No ghosts in your boots. None that still follow me." She leaned against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. "Then I'll stop looking over mine." That night, they lay in bed with the windows open, a breeze moving through the room like a hush. Faye traced the scar along Orin's collarbone, the one he'd gotten years back riding fence during a storm. "You ever think about how we got here?" she asked. "Every day. I used to think I'd die in the same place I was hurt." "You didn't," he said. "You lived, and you built something better." She rested her head against his chest. "With you, by August, the orchard had taken root." The trees stood firm, leaves full and green, and the first blossoms showed timidly on the apricot. Faye braided her hair differently now, looser, more like how she wore it when she read aloud to the children beneath the cottonwood. Orin kept building an extra stall in the barn, a small shed for tools near the creek, and each evening they sat outside together, watching the light fade. One Sunday, after supper, Ruth tugged at Faye's sleeve. "Will you tell the story again?" "The one where you found us." Faye looked to Orin, then back at her daughter. "Maybe it's time we made new stories, ones with no fear in them." Ramai chimed in, "Like the one where I caught the fox." Orin raised a brow. "You mean the one where the fox stole your boot?" The children laughed. And Faye did too, the sound full and easy. Later, after the children had gone to sleep and the dishes were washed, Orin stepped out to the porch. Faye followed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. They stood together, watching the sky turn indigo, the first stars winking through. He took her hand. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous thing," she teased. He smiled, the kind that showed in his eyes. "I want to build a room off the back, bigger, with space for a cradle." She turned slowly. "You're sure?" I don't speak on things I don't mean. She touched his shoulder, steady. Then I'll help you draw the plans. They stood a while longer, their silence filled with the chirp of crickets and the low rustle of leaves. When they went back inside, the house felt warmer than the fire could explain. The seasons passed. The children grew tall, their laughter stretching further across the land. The orchard bore fruit in its second year, small, tart apples and sweet apricots that Faye canned in rows of shining jars. She opened a second room in the schoolhouse and taught the older girls how to write letters sharp and proud. Orin built the new room behind the house, and by the next winter, it held a cradle he carved himself, its corners smooth and strong. Faye laid a quilt over it stitched by her own hands, in colors she never used to wear. The morning she told him about the child growing inside her, she didn't cry. She only placed his hand over the curve of her belly, and he closed his fingers there like it was the most natural thing in the world. They stayed, through every season, every harvest, every long night and golden morning they stayed, not out of duty but choice. They built their life with open eyes and calloused hands, and nothing about it was easy, but everything about it was true. And when the world shifted again, as it always does, they met it side by side, with love rooted deep and nothing left to run from.